And finally, we will talk also about STEM. Here in the campus, we will have a scanning transmission electron microscope belonging to this institute, to the Catalysis and Cerámica y Vidrio. So it will be a common project for having this STEM here in the campus, available for all of us. So we will hear all the possibilities that offer to us for material science characterization. But today, we can start this cycle talking about artificial intelligence by Eduardo Hernández, that is the leader of this transversal action that we want to implement and foster at the Institute.
I think this is the third talk already this year on the topic of artificial intelligence. We had a very interesting seminar on the Nobel Prize in Chemistry 2024 early in January, and more recently another one on the Nobel Prize in Physics. Both those Nobel Prizes, as you may recall, were awarded to people that had some connection, closer or not so close, but not too far, to artificial intelligence. And today you have a third seminar on the topic, artificial intelligence. Today I want to focus on the relation, the possibilities that artificial intelligence brings in material science for exploitation. Let me see if this works. Yes, excellent. Okay, so these are the topics I plan to cover if I have time. First, okay, well, we work in material science. What does artificial intelligence have to do with us? Can it be useful? Obviously, if the answer to this question was no, I wouldn't be giving this talk. So I will try to convince you that it is, that has the potential for being useful. But not all of you may be so familiar with what artificial intelligence is. So actually the largest part of my talk is going to be about giving a short, a bird's eye view introduction of what artificial intelligence is. Sorry for the experts, but I'm assuming that not everyone is familiar. I will then illustrate some of the things that it can do for us, and some of the things that we are currently doing in the Institute with artificial intelligence. And if there is time, well, you know, it's always very dangerous to make predictions, especially predictions about the future. That's meant to be a joke, by the way. But I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to try to make a prediction on not the distant future, because that is, of course, even more dangerous, but the very imminent future. I think what I will have to say on this point is already beginning to happen. And I want to make it clear at this stage, everything I'm going to say, almost nothing is cut in stone. It's all based on my own view, my own interpretation of what artificial intelligence and machine learning and all these topics are. So you should take it as that, as a personal opinion. Nothing is cut in stone, or very little is, anyway. This is actually a very fluid and rapidly evolving field, so a definition that is good today might not be good tomorrow. So let me start with the first topic of my list. Can it be useful for us? I think it would take you know, a person living in complete isolation not to have noticed that we are in the midst of a technological revolution. It's the technological revolution of artificial intelligence. This has been long in the making. It may give you the impression that it's something that started yesterday, but it actually has been going on slowly at the beginning and more rapidly in later times. But it has been going on ever since we have computers, or perhaps even earlier. And we see the effects in our daily lives everywhere. I can't remember the last time I phoned my bank and got to speak to a person, right? You get to speak to a robot nowadays, to a virtual assistant, right? And it's like that with everything. We hear about self-driving cars, appliances at home that you can speak and give orders to, and you will be understood, and so on and so on. Now, this technological revolution is affecting us in all aspects of our life, and science is not immune to that. I think there's not a single discipline in science or even the humanities that has not been affected in one way or another, usually positively, I guess. So that goes for chemistry, medicine, all the list. Even, believe it or not, pure mathematics. I mean, you would think that mathematics was something that you did with pencil, pure mathematics at least, pencil and paper. It's about demonstrating theorems. Well, this paper came out about a year ago or a year and a half. It's a paper in Nature showing how artificial intelligence can be used to suggest the statements of new theorems that then mathematicians can devote their time to demonstrate. Okay, so this is true for all branches of science, and it's certainly true for material science in particular. This is data taken from the Web of Science late last year. And what I'm doing here is to plot over the last 30 years the numbers of papers, those are the vertical bars, the numbers of papers that had a topic which contained these four, this combination of keywords, condensed matter or materials as representative of material science, together with artificial intelligence or machine learning. And you can see that at the very beginning, 1995, of those 30 years ago, nothing very much was happening. It was just a handful of papers, if at all. Right? But about 10 years ago, starting 2015, everything changed, and the number of papers published rocketed through the sky. You probably cannot see the numbers, but on the right here, on the left, we have the numbers of papers published per year. So in 2023, it was around 2,000 papers. It's impossible to keep on top of the literature with that number of papers published per year. At the same time, those papers had of the order of 50,000 citations, right? So this by itself is a good hint that machine learning and artificial intelligence are having a tremendous impact in all branches of science, but in particular in material science. So if this is happening, we should perhaps take note of it. As I was saying at the beginning of the talk, it's not only me who's saying this. The Swedish Academy of Sciences decided to award the Nobel Prize in Physics to two people, Geoffrey Hinton and John Hopfield, for foundational discoveries and inventions that enable machine learning with artificial neural networks. And at the same time, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry was, well, one half of it at least, because it was shared by three people, but these two shared one half of the prize. So that one half of the prize went to Demis Hassabis and John Jumper, two scientists that used the developments that these other gentlemen were responsible for to speed up the advancement of science, in particular to solve a long-standing problem in biochemistry, which was to predict the structure, the three-dimensional structure of proteins from starting from the sequence of amino acids that makes each protein. Okay, so this was an unsolved problem that these gentlemen were able to solve using artificial intelligence. Okay, so yes, this is really having an impact. Anyway, what should we do about this? I distinguish three different levels. It doesn't mean that, we work in material sciences, we are physicists or chemists or biologists. We don't necessarily need to become, all of us, experts in artificial intelligence. But I think it's very useful to know that this is happening on the one hand, and to have some general idea on the capabilities, on the basics of what artificial intelligence is. Because if you know those basics, you might be able to exploit them, perhaps not personally, but through collaborators, and make more out of your research. Likewise, a second level that I consider is the group level, and here the situation is a little bit the same. Not all groups need to become fluent, let's say, in artificial intelligence, but it is nevertheless true, and I hope this will become clear later in the talk, that knowing about artificial intelligence will open the possibilities for new synergic approaches to how you do your own research. Now there's a third level, and here I think the picture changes, and that's the collective level, what I call the collective level. For example, the level of our institute here. At this level, I think we cannot afford to miss this train. We really have to jump on this wagon, because otherwise, to put it in the words of Mark Cuban, by the way, is an American entrepreneur. He's probably not so well known over here, but he's he's always present in social networks with statements such as this one. So he said about this, artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, whatever you're doing, if you don't understand it, learn it. Because otherwise, in 3 years, you're going to become a dinosaur. Okay, this is perhaps a bit of an exaggeration, a flashy statement, but for the collective level, I think this carries a grain of truth in it. Certainly, if you scan the web, you will notice other institutions similar to our own that are already taking note of this and taking action. So I just took two quick examples of places that could compare to our own institute, like the Max Planck Institute for Sustainable Materials. They have already, I don't know if it's a department, a division or what, but they are active in applying artificial intelligence to their problems. Berkeley is another case. And these are just two random examples quickly chosen. But, the web is full of them. Okay, so much for trying to convince you that this is something that we need to take action about. Let me now move into explaining briefly and simply what I understand for artificial intelligence. Okay, so let me start with some definitions, because sometimes the jargon can be a bit confusing. Artificial intelligence, machine learning and deep learning, sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, and they're not exactly interchangeable. They're not exactly synonyms. So artificial intelligence, that's the name we give to the whole field. Artificial intelligence concerns itself, for example, with the fabrication of imagine a robotic arm in a production chain in a factory. That's the object of work of artificial intelligence. It contains algorithms. You have to design how the arm is going to move and do its function. But there's also a mechanical part to it, right? How the joints work, how the instruments are implemented. So all that is the realm, the interest of artificial intelligence. Machine learning in particular, and I'm going to be talking essentially about machine learning in the rest of the talk, that's a subfield of artificial intelligence, is the subfield I'm concerned with. And it has to do with the design, the creation of algorithms that perform a given task learning to perform that task from data that is relevant to that particular objective. Okay, and I will elaborate on this so it becomes clearer in the rest of the talk. Finally, there is deep learning. Deep learning is again a subfield, but a subfield of machine learning. And it concerns itself with a particular type of model, which is what we call a neural network. And I will also be elaborating on this later in the talk. Pictorically, the thing looks like this. So artificial intelligence is the whole field. Machine learning consists of many different types of models, algorithms, and one particular kind of model is the neural network, and that defines what deep learning is. Okay? So, machine learning and material science, what's the relation? How can they work together? So in my view, machine learning rests on three main pillars. The first one is models. Models is what we use, to represent the world around us, albeit in a simplistic way. Models are what allow us to make predictions on what is going to happen next, given a starting situation. The second pillar on which machine learning rests is algorithms. Okay, models per se don't do anything. You have to train them. You have to get them to recognize the situation that they're really trying to model. And the third pillar, the third leg, is data. Okay, without data, you cannot train your models. Without algorithms and data, you cannot train your models. And this is where material science comes in, okay? Because we have been doing this for decades now. We have many different sorts of databases, data repositories, where we have stored everything that we have done in the past. When you go to the lab and synthesize a new compound, and then you take it to the X-ray diffraction machine and get its structure, you will put your results in a database, in a crystallographic database. Likewise, if you work with different types of materials, such as metal organic frameworks, covalent organic frameworks, zeolites, you name it, there will be a database for it. And these databases have been used for a very long time, just as repositories of data, just as references. But now we are at a time when that data can be taken advantage of to construct models that give us a completely different set of new possibilities in material science. And hopefully this will be clear later in the talk. So let's consider now, what does it mean, machine learning? You could easily download the entire contents of the Wikipedia onto your computer, right? It doesn't mean that your computer has learned anything. It hasn't suddenly become more knowledgeable, and it can't do anything that it could do before, just because you have downloaded all that information. So let's try to understand what we mean by machine learning. We say this is, there are many definitions in the internet. This is the one I find clearest and the one that I like the best. We say a computer program learns from experience, and wherever you read experience, you can also read data. If that's for me, I'm not here. So I was saying a computer program is said to learn from experience, and experience also means data, right? With respect to some task and some performance measure, P, if its performance on the task improves with experience, okay? And this is a definition that goes back to Thomas Mitchell. It might be a little bit difficult to digest at first, but let me try to put it in a more pictorial way. So this, by the way, is my most important slide today. If you understand this message, you can sleep through the rest of the talk in the safety that you will have understood the really important thing. Okay, so this is the general scheme of a machine learning model. In comes some data, right? That data has to be represented in a way that the model can work with, but I'm not going to concern myself with that at the moment. So the data comes in, it produces some output. The model produces some output with that data. And from the output, you can measure the performance, how well the model is doing its job, okay? Right, the model always depends on some parameters. I also say hyperparameters here, but forget about those for the time being. We'll come back to those later. So there are some parameters that the model depends upon, okay? So the model produces the output implicitly. The output is a function of those parameters, okay? And because the output is a function of those parameters, so is the performance, because the performance you calculate, you measure with the output, okay? And here is the key step. The key step is what we call learning, okay? Because the performance is a model, the performance is a function of the parameters, I can tweak those parameters appropriately to make my model work better, okay? To do its job better. How I do that? I said the performance is just a function of the parameters, sigma, right? If it is a function, I can always calculate the gradient of a function, the gradient of the function performance with respect to the parameters. And the gradient gives me a direction in parameter space along which to move to optimize the performance. And this is how you do it, right? You take your old parameters, you add in some of the gradient of the performance with respect to the parameters, how much is measured by this parameter mu, which is typically called the learning rate, how fast your model is learning, right? And with that, you obtain new parameters which will make the model perform better. And you can keep repeating this until you cannot gain any more. So your model will be completely optimized by that stage. Okay? So this is the main idea behind every machine learning model that you're likely to come across. There are many different types of machine learning models, and because of time, I have no possibility of covering them all. I just want to focus on a specific kind of model that we call neural network. You can see that here is the inspiration. This is a crude, very crude replica. The inspiration comes from a drawing by Santiago Ramón y Cajal. This is what he saw when looking under the microscope to a section of the visual cortex of the human brain. Okay, so there you see lots of neurons with interconnections among them, and we try to replicate that with this very crude model, which is called a multi-layer perceptron. If we take a look in more detail at the neurons, both the natural, the natural neurons and the artificial ones. Okay, so in a real neuron, a biological neuron, let's say, there's the nucleus of the cell. It receives information from other neurons on the left here, and this information comes in the form of electrochemical impulses, right? Now, after receiving this input, the neuron may do one of two things. It may either activate or remain deactivated. If it activates, if it fires up, so to speak, it will also by itself transmit information further down the line through its axon and its axon terminals to other neurons. With an artificial neuron, we try to do the same. Let's look at it in more detail. So in comes some input, which now will not be electrochemical signals, but rather numbers. Okay? Those numbers, those inputs are weighted by some parameters of the model, which we are going to later adjust. We will combine them in this linear way to produce Z, an internal state of the neuron, so to speak. And that internal state, that internal value, is then filtered through what we call an activation function. There are many types of activation functions, but this is not important at this level. So the input state goes through the activation function to produce an output that is going to be transmitted to other neurons down the line, okay? And the whole process will work like this when you put all these neurons together. So in comes your input, right? It's transformed linearly in each neuron like that, and you will get an output. Now, the key point in this kind of model is that, and that's the point of the activation function, we want to make these linear transformations. If we only had linear transformations, we would only have a concatenation of linear transformations. Now, a concatenation of linear transformations is just a linear transformation. And a linear model has less flexibility, less expressive capacity, so to speak, than a nonlinear one. So the role of the activation function is to make, to make this entire model highly nonlinear, and thus giving it a higher expressive capacity, a larger flexibility. So there are my model parameters, the ones I tweak to make my model work better, right? Those weights and biases that come in there. And if you remember, I spoke also of hyperparameters. Hyperparameters are not numerical values, but descriptors of the model in some cells. So how many neurons I have per layer, how many layers I have how many layers I concatenate in the neural network. Okay, so this is the basic kind, the workhorse of deep learning with neural networks. Now, as I hinted at already, neural networks are very useful because they have a great expressive capacity, a great flexibility. They can represent almost anything, if not anything. This basic structure that I described, the multi-layer perceptron, can be adapted, reshaped to many different forms, adapting it to different kinds of problems. So it really can tackle lots of different problems. And neural networks, there is actually a mathematical theorem to demonstrate this, what are called universal approximators. So any kind of function, no matter how complicated, can be approximated by an adequately designed and trained neural network. Now, I want to show you a trivial toy example, which I hope will be illustrative. Let's assume that I have this function that I don't know, and I want to find a neural network that will learn it, that will reproduce it. Okay, so I'm going to try doing that with a simple multi-layer perceptron, where the input is going to be the value of x. Okay, so my function depends on just one value, yeah, x. So I'm going to give it as input to my model, x squared, and x cubed. I could do this with just x, but for fun, I'm going to give it some added flexibility, right? Some added information. So there's going to be 2 layers of neurons, each one with 10 neurons in total. I didn't draw them all here. And a final output number, which will be the value of the function. Now, this model, you can easily calculate it. It has 161 adjustable parameters, 161 sigmas. Okay, so now I have to tweak those sigmas to make my neural network learn my function. Okay, so there's my neural network, my initial guess of neural network. This is what it predicts with a bunch of randomly chosen numerical sigma values. How does it do? I want to stop this at a particular point. Okay, well, let me go back. You can see that it's it learns little by little, and eventually it just repeats and repeats, but eventually it gets to reproduce almost perfectly, in fact perfectly, the function that we have. Now, this is a very artificial situation, because normally I don't know my function everywhere. And here I was using all the values of the function defined between 0 and 1 to train my neural network. The more common situation is this one. I only know the function in a few points, right? Not everywhere. If I knew it everywhere, I wouldn't need the neural network in the first place. But typically the situation in which I find myself is I have some data, but I don't know the underlying function of that data everywhere. So can I train my neural network with just a small fraction of data point information? In fact, much fewer points than parameters my model has. This sounds like contradictory, but yes, you can indeed do that, and here is the proof. Okay, again, the blue points are trying to learn, so the neural network is trying to learn what the red dots, where the red dots are, and eventually it learns that. And once I have trained the neural network, I can use it to replicate, to reproduce the unknown function everywhere. And how does it do? It doesn't do so badly, right? Of course, it cannot reproduce the original function where it had no information, but you can agree with me that it doesn't do a bad job at all with this limited amount of information. So this is the most basic type of a neural network. It can be adapted to many different situations, like convolutional neural networks is a variation of that basic model, which is ideal for problems with images, such as classification of images. You can have recurrent neural networks, which are ideal for representing time-dependent data, for example. Predicting next frames in video sequences and things like that. But neural networks can do a lot more than simply fitting functions. I guess you will not be surprised by seeing pictures like these anymore, right? We are not in the early days of artificial intelligence still. Can you guess what's wrong with this picture? Is there anything catchy? Is there anything peculiar? No? Yeah, they're all smiling, but that's not what they have in common, or not what I'm thinking of anyway. What's happening here is that these people, they don't exist, right? These are not real photographs. They are just figments in the imagination of an artificial intelligence model, what we call generative AI, okay? Nevertheless, they're very believable, aren't they? They look real, but they don't exist. And this begs the question, okay, if we can do this with human faces, you will agree with me that a human face is not a particularly simple concept to work with. I have tried making portraits of people, and I know it's a complicated business. But a neural network can do this very easily. And if it can do that with something so complex and so subtle as a human face, why not do it? Why couldn't it do it with materials? Couldn't we use something like this, a model like this, to suggest new materials, perhaps with tailor-measured properties that might be desirable? I'll come back to this point later in the talk. Okay. So let me now illustrate with some examples the kind of things that I'm involved in concerning artificial intelligence or machine learning in collaboration with different people in this institute. Unfortunately, I don't want to overrun my time, so I'm going to be very brief in some of them. So this was one of my first applications of machine learning in the context of materials, and it's a collaboration with the 2D Foundry group, in particular with Yongxi and his students. So they work with 2D materials, as you know, and in this particular case, they were synthesizing flakes of molybdenum disulfide. This is an idealized picture of what you get in the lab when you synthesize these materials. That's an individual flake, but more often than not, when you grow them in the lab, you can get bilayers, trilayers, and even more. So they were very interested in having an automated way of classifying or structurally identifying these different flakes. It was fortunate for us that these flakes tend to grow in a triangular shape, so you spot them very easily under the microscope. So one first problem was to do what in the jargon is called a segmentation process. Segmentation process just means having an image, recognizing the different bits that make up that image. For example, this is a very important problem in self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are constantly taking photos of the environment and recognizing whether this particular set of pixels is a pedestrian or a traffic signal or another vehicle, right? That's called segmentation. And we use that technique of segmentation to rapidly and automatically identify different levels of intensity of purple, which you can correlate with the fact that you have a monolayer or a bilayer, etc. So this was a nice application. A second application within this context was to predict the twist angle. Because these flakes grow in conditions out of equilibrium, so you don't always get the perfect matching orientation between a layer and its overlayer on top. Sometimes you get a twist angle, and this is important because certain properties of these materials can depend on that twist angle. Until we did this, the students of Yongxi had to go sample by sample, measure very carefully what was the orientation of one triangle with respect to the other, and it was kind of tedious work. So we trained a neural network to tell us what those twist angles were in a fraction of a second. Now, one difficulty that we had to confront was that we didn't have enough samples, experimental samples in which the twist angle had been determined. But luckily, because these flakes grow in these nice triangular shapes more often than not, it's very easy to create an artificial database of triangles with random orientations, one with respect to the other. And we trained our model based on that artificial data set, and it works like a breeze. I should say that recently I had to present these results in a different context, and I was heavily criticized by someone in the audience because they told me this is like killing flies with cannons, right? Because you don't need a huge a data set and a neural network to solve this problem. You can solve it by just fitting a line to each triangle, and okay, yes, you can do that, but actually it's not killing flies with cannonballs. It takes a matter of minutes to generate a database of triangles, images, and the neural network that you need to do this is not so complicated, and it does take no time to train either. So yes, you could probably do it in a simpler way, but I resent that accusation, so to speak. Now, this is another example of things we have been doing lately, this is in collaboration with Materials for Medicine and Biotechnology group. If you forgive me, because I'm running short of time, I'm just going to mention this. If you're interested in the details, it has been published very recently. But I want to skip to the final example of application, which I think, because it's on the making, you cannot read about it elsewhere until we publish it. And this is what we call spectral reconstruction. It's a collaboration, again, with the 2D Foundry group. Now, the idea here is to miniaturize spectrometers, right? Or at least to show that we can go in that direction. The basic idea is to use an array of LEDs, of light-emitting diodes, right? So the normal way in which you operate an LED is you would make a current circulate through it and it would produce light, okay? Right, light of a different, of a given wavelength. But you can also use it in reverse. You can shine light on it and get it to produce a photocurrent. And from those photocurrents, if you have an array of distinct LEDs, in principle, there's nothing to stop you from reconstructing the spectrum that generated that set of photocurrents. Let me illustrate it in a little bit more detail. So we work with an array of LEDs like that. Someone in the 2D Foundry actually measured these characteristic functions of each of the LEDs, where you get the photocurrent that each one of them, 12 in total we had, would produce when being emitted with light of a given, in this range of wavelengths. Okay, so you have a spectrum that incides on the array of LEDs. That spectrum would produce a bunch of photocurrents. And now the idea is, okay, if we have enough of these photocurrents and enough of these spectra, can we train a machine learning model to reproduce, to tell us what the spectrum was? So again, we're confronted with a problem of not having enough experimental data to do this. But, you know, we all have an idea what spectra look like. You have a bunch of peaks, right? Gaussians or Lorentzians or whatever. You can very quickly generate an artificial set of likely spectra. And because we have the characteristic functions of the LEDs, we can calculate which photocurrents each of these spectra would produce, okay? And from that information, train a neural network to, given the photocurrents, reproduce the spectra. And that is what the red lines are, okay? The original spectra, synthetic, not real, but are the blue ones, right? And the red ones are the reconstructed spectra, which, as you see, capture the essential features of the inside the spectra. Now, does this work with real spectra as well as with synthetic ones? This is the proof that it does. So yes, this spectral reconstruction project works, and it works very, very nicely. Okay, those are just very quickly told examples, just 3 of them, but there are an infinite array of possibilities in which you can use machine learning in problems of material science. For example, prediction and interpretation of different types of spectra, accurate modeling of experimental data. One thing that is very close to my previous field of interest, which continues to be a field of interest for me, which is modeling with empirical potentials. So now we can work with neural network potentials that essentially have the accuracy and the reliability of first principles calculations. First principles calculations are very limited in their use because of the huge cost, computational cost involved. But now we can train neural networks on ab initio calculations and do our simulations much more cheaply than we were able to do before. You can also use machine learning to optimize experimental procedures and, well, along, etc. Now, I think the intention of Jose Angel when he asked me to give this talk was not so much to tell you about my particular work, but to tell you about the AI lab. So I will comply. So you have probably all heard about this transversal initiative, the aim of which is, as well as starting the use of machine learning in our institute, to foster its use, right, and to foster, to create new expertise, in-house expertise on machine learning and artificial intelligence, and through artificial intelligence to facilitate the creation of new collaborations within the groups in this house. Two specific initiatives that we are undertaking in this respect is the celebration of a course, an introductory course, mostly directed to students and young researchers, but open to everyone, which will be a basic introduction to the Python programming language with some introduction also to machine learning. Python, why Python? Because Python is essentially the lingua franca in which everything to do with artificial intelligence and machine learning is done. And later in the spring, we calculate around May, we plan to celebrate a one-day event of, where people, because I'm not the only one working with artificial intelligence here, where people that use these tools can tell us about what they are doing and what they hope to achieve with this, with machine learning. This was something that was made very clear in an earlier talk that we had last year by Cefe. The title, if I recall correctly, was something like things that machine learning and artificial intelligence, materials and machine learning can do for each other. I want to remind you of that. It's not only the case that material science stands to benefit from machine learning. One of the problems of machine learning is that it's very energy hungry nowadays. The carbon footprint of large language models like ChatGPT and so on is really very large. We definitely need new paradigms of information technology to reduce this cost. And whatever those paradigms are, they are surely going to come from developments in material science. Okay, so it's not just a one-way relationship; it's a two-way relationship, and Cefe illustrated that very well in his talk. So probably whatever solves this problem is going to come in one of these lines, and we have groups working in those topics in the institute. Okay, other activities, I'm probably going to skip this because I'm really out of time. I promised you that I would make some predictions about the future in spite of the dangers involved. What might the immediate, future bring in this context? And now you remember this picture that I showed earlier on. It was made by a generative machine learning algorithm. Could we do this with materials. And this is already beginning to happen. Other groups around the world are taking steps in this direction. This is a paper published last year, in which they show how to do it with organic molecules. I don't think it's yet the ultimate. This is still work in progress and is not terribly efficient, but it can be done with molecules. And only a couple of weeks ago, there was this paper published in, it's not yet even officially published, it's only available in the form of a preprint, but Nature already publicizes it. So this is a work in which they use generative algorithms to propose new types of materials. And in this particular, let me see if I can make it run again. No? Let's try again. Yeah. So here they use this piece of software that they created, MatterGen, to get propositions of new materials with a particular requirement that this material should have a band gap of 3 electron volts. And the algorithm came back with this proposal, which I'm not exactly sure of the composition, but I think it's a vanadium bismutite or something like this. Again, it's very early days for this kind of technology, and I'm sure this is very expensive to run. But you know, models such as these will keep being improved, and it will be very interesting in the future, I think. So almost right on time, right? Okay. I tried to convince you that machine learning can be very useful in the context of material science. My answer for that is definitely yes. I tried to give a bird's eye view of the main concepts in machine learning and how that can be useful for material science. Just a very few words on the AI-Lab, which most of you know about anyway, I guess. And many things I couldn't discuss because of lack of time. But I hope you found something interesting. To conclude, acknowledgements. The AI-Lab is not just myself. There is a steering committee behind it, made by these people. And some volunteers chosen by me have been so good as to help with the organization of the events that I referred to earlier on. And I also want to thank the collaborators in the applications that I briefly discussed. And finally, I thank the director's team for proposing the celebration of this lecture. And with that, thank you very much. I'll try to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions?
I left you all speechless.
Comments?
Just a curiosity about like the hardware requirements for like the applications.
Yeah.
Do you have like a special need, like if you want to go like farther to like other more interesting stuff, you need some other, let's say, facilities?
That's a very nice question, because it gives me the opportunity of saying something that I had in mind to say, but in the heat of the moment forgot. All the applications that I've shown, the 3 examples of work done here, were really toy models, honestly. I mean, you can get started with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, without the need of massive amounts of computer time. And you can get a long way that way. But it's true, I mean, if you consider, I mean, there are many applications that do require a lot more. For example, the generative algorithm for suggesting new materials, I haven't had the chance to play with it, but I'm sure that takes a lot more computational effort. It depends really on the application. For some applications, you would do well to have GPUs, but I think it's definitely the case. It has been the case for me so far. I didn't do anything that I couldn't run on my laptop.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I have a comment, but it's not for you. I think it's for the general audience. I think that because we have a long trajectory in synthesizing and characterizing different kinds of materials, we have something that is quite unvaluable, apart from the fact of the data that you find in the usual repositories. We have our own data in our own computers. So to some extent, that's a very really added value for the activity of running artificial intelligence algorithms and so on. So, and indeed, sometimes you can overcome, because of your own data, the problems that you may find, for instance, when you do not rely on recipes that are being published or something like that. You know what has worked in your lab, and then you can use that kind of data to improve and focus a reasonable, an output that can be consistent with your knowledge. I think that's important. And then I had a technical question, because the way in which the algorithms work, it's kind of deepest distant with the gradients search for the parameters that you are touching into the system. How you can explore different minima in your function? How you can jump to a completely, out of the blue set of parameters that you could never think of?
Right. Yeah, that's also a very important question. Of course, there's as the saying goes, the devil is in the details, right? What I hinted at was the simplest kind of approach to optimize the parameters of a model. But there's a whole branch of work in machine learning on how to make algorithms better for optimizing parameters. And to some extent, it depends on the particular kind of model and application that you're trying to work. But my limited experience, because I'm speaking here as if I was an expert, but this is a new topic for me. 4 years ago, I wasn't working on this. My experience so far, as I was saying, is that the methods that are currently available are extremely robust. Yeah. So there might invariably there will be situations in which you fall into traps, and it would be good to try to get out of them. There are techniques for that, but it requires tweaking things. Yeah. So concerning your earlier point about the data, I would just simply like to mention that something that we don't always realize is that the whole of the laws of chemistry, the laws of physics, are hidden in all that data, right? If you think of a compound that is impossible because the laws of chemistry wouldn't allow it, it's not going to be represented there. Right? A machine learning model that is adequately defined can learn those rules of chemistry without being taught. This is what I was referring to earlier when I was saying learning from data. Okay, that's what machine learning is about. So yeah, final comment from me.
Thank you for your talk, Eduardo.
Thank you.
I was wondering about synthesized data, because sometimes in research, it's very difficult to have a large amount of data about the same experiment, because it's really hard to get just one or two of them. How is this role of the synthesized data in your What is your take on this? What is...
So I actually had to do this on two of the studies that I showed, right? Let me go to that quickly. So in the spectral reconstruction data, for example, the blue spectra are reference data, but they are synthetic. You know, we all have an idea of what a spectrum looks like. You have peaks at different frequencies or wavelengths in this case, right? They're not real. They're not real because we didn't have enough real data to work from. If you have some knowledge of the data that you're trying to reproduce, like in this case, you know, a spectrum may have 1, 2, 3 peaks at different frequencies, but that's about it. So you can easily generate a synthetic training database, which is what we had to do here.
So
Okay.
physics is what does, no? So you can enhance with physics the...
Yes, exactly. So if you have some background knowledge about the problem, which you usually have, or you usually know someone who does, you can, you know, resort to tricks like this one. Yeah. And so far we have been lucky. It has worked in the two occasions we have tried it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
I think we all agree that data is the essence of everything, and it's the prime matter upon which we build anything. And the saying goes that we are running out of data, for instance, in the large language models, because Google is already coded into many large language models, and now this is like the new kind of gold. But in material science, I believe that choosing because the data is the essence and the crucial point, do you believe that in the near future, which is what we are likely to predict, is there going to be a new class of scientists whose mission is data curation, for instance, rather than typing code or creating new algorithms and these sort of things?
I wouldn't be surprised if such a occupation existed already. Bear in mind that behind those databases that I referred to, earlier, behind those databases of different types of data, here, so there's people that curate them and well, come on. Behind all those databases, there's a devoted team that looks after them and makes them available and accessible to the community. I don't know if that answers your...
Not really, because those data were prior to the searching of artificial intelligence for material science. They were uncurated in a way, because you plug there the X-ray diffraction of everything in all the resolutions that you can, and you don't care. But if you go to your example in which you have different diodes, there's a frequency precision in which your data is clearly insufficient.
Yes.
Because no spectra was appropriate because it didn't have signal there. So a data curator would say this data set is not good. So it has to be improved.
I see what you mean. Yes. I don't foresee the need for that in the general case. I foresee it, as you say, in each problem. Like there, I mean, we noticed ourselves, it would be good to have an extra LED that covered this range of wavelengths. Unfortunately, it was not doable within the immediate time scale. But yes, on a case-by-case situation, but by all means, yes.
Already data miners since the open access publication and these kind of things, that's already exists.
So featureization, I think, is also, when you were speaking of the older databases where the data is there in some format, you have to transform that format into some other format that your model can work with. But again, so far, I think this happens on a case-by-case basis.
More questions? So data seems that is the point, no? To have good data available and in the correct format. So perhaps something to work with in this AI-Lab.
Mm-hmm.
And for sure, many of you have problems, and perhaps you have to approach Eduardo or any one of this committee of the AI.
Yeah, if I one very quick last statement. Because it's something I wanted to say, and again left it in the inkpot. Before I started working with this, for me, it would have been very difficult to collaborate, for example, with the 2D Foundry group or with the biology group, with the tools that I had then in my hand. I think one key aspect of machine learning is that it makes these collaborations, this kind of collaborations between different groups, much easier and to take place. So yeah, I think this is the great added value of machine learning, and that's one of the main reasons why we should work with it here.
So nothing else.
Thank you.